Okay, let's hope that it will stay connected. Again, it's me, Martins, from MikroTik. And when I had to go to the MAM and make a presentation, there were a lot of possibilities to choose a topic about what I would like to talk. And then I decided to be a little bit selfish, because I work in support, and every day I get emails from our clients complaining about different things, simple things, difficult things, and so on. So then I asked a question to myself. If I would be a client, how would I like to learn about the MikroTik, and how I would like to debug my problems in my network, and even in complicated setups. Now when I work in MikroTik support, I do it in the same way, starting from the very, very basics. So this presentation will give you a little bit information about how you should configure your, for example, home router starting from zero. Basically, I will try to explain default configuration and add some other things, tell you about different tools which you can use on the RouterOS, and what you should do if you get some kind of problem which you can't resolve by yourself. So, first of all, RouterOS is the same everywhere. So basically, if you learn how to use one command on one router, then you will be able to use the same command, same functionality on another device. You can take simple home access point, for example, create firewall there. You will be able to use same rules on CCR devices and so on. So basically, if you learn something, then you will be able to do it on any of RouterOS devices. Okay, now you bought a router. How to access it? There are, at the moment, 4 basic possibilities. First of all, there's command line interface. You can connect to device, for example, through Telnet or SSH, and configure everything if you like to use keyboard by using commands, for example, like IP address, add address, and so on. Usually, more experienced users does that, but others mostly use graphical interfaces, for example, WebFig. WebFig is interface, web browser interface, where you basically open RouterOS interface in web browser. You just type in IP address, and if you have access to device, if a routing table allows you to access this device and firewall or something else isn't blocking you, there you will be able to configure your device. Recently, we also introduced a mobile application called TikUp, which works on Android devices. So you can also connect to your router from your Android mobile phone. It also looks pretty similar to WebFig in some way, in a way how windows are, where are they placed, and what is under each menu, and so on. And there's also Wimbox. Wimbox is a special tool created by us, by MikroTik, which allows to access RouterOS devices through this special tool. It's most likely the easiest, not the easiest, most comfortable tool to configure device, because you can open multiple windows at the same time, see multiple things at the same time. It's easy to debug problems and so on by using Wimbox. TikUp you can download if you go to our forum page, so because it's still on alpha stage. Wimbox you can download at our download page. WebFig you don't need to download, and of course command line interface also you don't need to download. Okay, now you can decide which tool you want to use and access your device. If you're a basic home user, you usually don't want to configure anything, right? You simply want to connect, select what you want, and use such configuration. So that is why we invented QuickSet. This is Winbox tool, which I was talking about. I have opened QuickSet on the Winbox, and you can see at the top that there are, for example, for HPC device, multiple multiple quickset modes which I can select. Just choose which setup you would like to use, fill some basic things like password, username, and so on, and then you can use your router without worrying about firewall and other things. Basically for simple home user. But there is one catch. It's a recommendation from us. If you use quickset, then stick to the quickset. Because as soon you make configuration on quickset, leave quickset, do something elsewhere, for example in firewall or something like that, you will go back to the quickset, apply again configuration, you might lose something. You might, because quickset applies template of configuration to device. So if you did something outside of quickset, you might run into the problems. Yes, and quickset contains the most commonly used features, basically templates, and for simple home user it should be enough. Okay, that was about quickset for home user. But now let's talk about security from the level 0, from the very, very basics. The first thing, not only on RouterOS but everywhere, what you should do is set a password for your user. And of course, don't forget it, okay? If you forget it, you will need to reset your device. There is no way to access it without knowing password. Okay, you now have a new router, connect to it and set password for your user. Here you can see an example where you can open system user menu, select your user, select to change password and type in your password or use command line interface. We also recommend to not use admin username, which is a default username for MikroTik devices. So it's better to change the user to Martins, for example, for me. And then if you see, for example, in logging that someone has tried to connect to your device with username admin, you know it's not you, it's someone else. They just saw that it's MikroTik device, or the username must be admin. So we suggest to change the name. If your device has wireless, then of course it's not enough to set password only on your router. You should also set password right away for your wireless interface. That is done under wireless menu on any of our graphical interfaces. Also you can do that on command line interface under interface wireless security profiles menu. By default security profile is used. You can check which type of password you would like to use. Simply type it in, and now you will be able to connect to the wireless interface only by using this password. So there you will close your free access point, and only those who know the password will be able to use it. Now, something that sometimes people forget to do. If in my example I had HPC device, but I was using only 3 Ethernet interfaces. So why do I should left a hole in my configuration with 3 other Ethernet interfaces? If I do not plug cable therein, it's better to disable such interfaces. Otherwise, someone can just come, plug his computer in this Ethernet interface, and he will get an internet. So we suggest also to disable unused interfaces on your router. Very important thing is to not use unnecessary RouterOS packages. We very, very often see that people are complaining about low memory on device. But you know what they do? They install every possible package that there is on the device. There is no need for it. There are unnecessary services running on your router and consuming CPU and so on. So decide which packages you need. You can go under System Package menu, and for example, if you won't be using VPN, disable PPP package. If you won't be using IPv6, disable IPv6 package. And I made these slides a little while ago when there was no default IPv6 firewall, but for example, you can protect your device as much as you can. If you enable IPv6 package, there is no default firewall configuration. Anyone will be able to attack your device or something like that by using IPv6 address. So if you do not protect your device also on IPv6 level, and you don't really need IPv6 addressing, then it's better to just disable this package. Of course, after you disable all packages, reboot device, and now packages won't be running. Also, you should turn off services which you won't be using. For example, if you do not use Telnet to connect to your device, we really recommend to disable it, because I guess you know that many people are attacking routers all the time, and if they see that there is, for example, Telnet service available, they will be trying to connect to your device, consuming your CPU, and it will be bad for you. So why don't just simply go to the IP services tab and disable those services which you won't be using? So you should do that and allow only leave enabled only those services which you want. For example, I did leave only SSH, Telnet, Winbox, and web interface for webvig access. Okay, most of that was about layer 3 access to your device, but of course, maybe you know that you can, for example, use Winbox tool, and if you don't have IP access to your device, you can use MAC address to connect to your router. Someone also might try to do that, so that is why we suggest to disable MAC server and MAC Winbox server on your router on those interfaces which are not trusted. For example, someone can connect through one port or something like that. Enable these services only for interfaces which you trust. For example, in my case, by default on RouterOS, access is allowed from all interfaces. We have disabled these all interfaces and enabled access only for bridge interface. So if, for example, Ether1 is not in the bridge, you won't be able to access device through Ether1, through MAC Telnet or MAC Winbox. If you want to hide your device, which usually is done on ISP side, you should disable neighbor discovery on interfaces on your device. What it means? It means that on RouterOS and other devices, you won't be able to see these devices in neighbor discovery. For example, when you open Winbox, you open Discovery tab, you see MikroTik devices in your network. If interface on which this IP address was added is disabled in Discovery tab, you won't see it in Winbox. So, for example, if someone would want to try to attack your IP address, they won't know it because they won't see it in the Winbox. But otherwise, they can just open Inbox and see, aha, this address is used. I can try to attack it. So we suggest to do that. If you have a device, for example, CCR or something like that, which has serial port, if you don't use it by yourself, also we suggest to disable it. Why give someone access that they can just plug serial cable into your device and try to do something with your router? If you don't use it by yourself, also disable it. And also, if router has LCD and you don't use it, disable it. If you want to use it only for some information, disable touchscreen. So it's also possible, for example, to reset router configuration through LCD. But if you won't be doing it by yourself, better to disable it. And also, it won't be consuming CPU. Also, very important thing, remember to place your router in secure location. Believe me, we sometimes receive emails that the router was simply stolen. I don't have internet. Why? Router isn't there. Yeah, what should I do? Yeah, that's the one thing. But also, if you leave router in the public place, what's the most simple way how to reset device? Who knows? Just push the reset button and reboot device. We introduced new functionality which allows to disable reset button, which means you won't be able to reset router by using reset button. But it's not disabled completely. You can specify some time interval on which it only will start to work. For example, if you specify 30 to 35 seconds, you will have to hold it 30 or 31 or 32, 33, 34, 35 seconds. If you hold it longer, it won't work. If you hold it less, it won't work. So it protects reset button. So someone cannot simply just reset your router configuration. Okay, that was about very basics, disabling functionalities and so on. Now let's little bit talk about firewall. Basically, I will be telling about default MikroTik default firewall configuration, but if someone of you doesn't know how it works and what each rule does, I hope I will be able to explain you. So, first of all, there are two common practices how device is protected by firewall. Either you accept what you want to allow and drop everything else, or otherwise. Drop what you don't want to allow and accept everything else. In most cases, the first type is used. We accept connections which we want to accept and drop everything else. Here you can see an example. I accept connections from one IP address, .2, and I drop connections from all other IP addresses. So for example, only user with address .2 will be able to reach internet, but others won't be able to reach internet. They will, for example, use only local services. This is just an example of a way how it's done. So here are three magic firewall rules which are in RouterOS default configuration. First of all, as in, I guess, most networking equipment, we allow any ping packets. So you can ping your device, see that it's there. If you don't want to do that, you can, of course, change, drop such packets or something like that. But by default, it's allowed in our firewall. So first rule allows accepts packets in input chain. It's traffic coming to the router, not through it, not from it, but to router. And protocol ICMP. So what else we need to accept? We accept packets from connections which are already established and related. What it means? Let's assume that I tried to check for updates from router. Router did check that. I made a new connection to the outside, to our upgrade servers. But the reply was a packet belonging to already established connection. I have to accept it. I didn't accept new connection from outside, but I accepted reply to my request. That must be done, otherwise you won't be able to communicate. But in the end, I drop everything coming from, in my case, Ether 1 is an internet interface. I drop everything else. New connections from Ether 1 won't be possible. Invalid packets will be dropped. And only connections which will be possible, only packets in input chain will possible be replies to connections made from router itself due to this established related rule. That was in input chain. This is how it looks, for example, in graphic user interface. And this is an example of firewall rules which we have in forward chain. This means connection actually between internet and local network. Router is just forwarding packets through itself. Similarly, as it was with input chain, we accept established and related packets. This rule will allow replies from internet to local subnet, but not new connections, but replies. Next rule drops connections which has invalid state, which means that there are sometimes in internet packets, you usually use masquerade to mask your local subnet behind public IP address. But sometimes there are IP address packets where IP address isn't changed for some reason. And such connections, such packets has connection state invalid. They usually are dropped. They can sometimes mess with your VoIP calls and so on, you should always drop invalid packets on your firewall. And in the end, we have a firewall rule which will drop all new connections from in interface, which is internet interface, in my case Ether1. So internet won't be able to access my local subnet. But there is one catch. We have this connection NAT state not equal to destination NAT. I will tell a little bit about this later, but basically if you use port forwarding, then you have to allow access from internet to local services. So this rule will, this parameter will allow all such connections, because connection is knotted, you knotted it yourself, you allowed it. But about this I will tell you a little bit later. So this is how basic forwarding chain rules look. So let's move on. As I was telling, if you have public IP address, you have to mask your, in most cases, you have to mask your local IP addresses. So it would seem for internet provider that that all requests come from this one public IP address. Usually it's done by using masquerade rule, which simply says that all packages, all new connections, sorry, going out through Ether1, if it's out interface, it means that package is coming from local subnet to the internet. And action masquerade says simply put a source address, IP address, which is on Ether1 interface. So if I connect from a private network, then I will have public IP address on the internet, on the traffic which goes out to the internet. However, if you don't use dynamic public addresses, we strongly recommend to use SourceNet, because masquerade has a special effect that every time there is VPN tunnel connecting or disconnecting, it looks through all connection table which consumes CPU. For example, if you have, just an example, 500 tunnels, a masquerade role, every connect and disconnect will go through whole connection table just to see if there is connection which needs to be closed. That's specific to masquerade, so if you can, use SourceNet. It's basically the same thing, but masquerade checks itself what IP address is on Ether1 and puts it on your packets going out. But if you use SourceNet, you simply specify IP address manually and don't need to worry about this connection tracking looping. So, for some people, this picture is a nightmare, but actually, it's a manual which shows how packets are processed in RouterOS. At the very beginning, there's pre-routing, and then you see what happens after each step. For example, we can see that, for example, if post-routing there is SourceNet, you can see. If you will try to catch a new packet coming from local subnet in forward chain and check if it's SourceNet, you won't ever get such packet, because SourceNet will happen only after the forward. This is just an illustration, so you would know that packets are processed by facilities. 1, 2, 3, and next thing. So, as I was telling, if you want to allow access from internet to your local device, for example, HTTP server or anything what you want, you need to use NAT rule. Basically, it's usually called as port forwarding or DMZ or something like that. I will try to explain how simple it actually is, because every day we receive emails that port forwarding is broken in RouterOS, but it actually has never been broken. You usually forget something. There are a few simple things which need to be done. First of all, you have to create NAT rule. Okay, let's try to stick with me. We need to add chain destination NAT, which means I will change destination address of connection. In interface, it is internet interface. So if access comes from internet to specific IP address, I will change connection destination address. In my case, I played around with SSH access, so that's why protocol TCP and port 22. I said action destination at, change destination address, and if connection from internet comes to IP address 172.16.1.243, then I will redirect such connection actually to address 192 and so on and so on. That's the first thing you need to do. Now you can try to connect to 172 IP address, and you can see on firewall rule counters rising. It should be happening. But when there comes reply from your local subnet from 192 IP address, it will go outside with source address 192, right? You have to use masquerade or sourcenet to reply, to tell the router that reply is coming from 192 IP address. It must be translated and actually telling internet device that the reply is coming from 172 IP address. So connection must be knotted on both directions. And I think the most common mistake is that you have to accept traffic in forward chain. That previously explained that I dropped everything coming inside the router through internet interface except destination knotted package. That is what I was talking about. And in previous slide, you did see I accepted packets in forward, right? But what is connection? Main connection was made from internet to the router IP address. It should be input, right? No, it's not input. Because in pre-routing, you can see destination NAT happens before input. And now it's not input traffic, it's already forward because destination address was on local subnet, so we must accept packets in forward chain, not on the input chain. This is just an example why you should look up this drawing sometimes, so maybe you forget some facility in the middle and it might help you. Now, some basic firewall functionality, which was a long time asked from us. For example, how to block Facebook access on my office. In the past, you simply had to add every Facebook used IP address on address list and drop access to such IP addresses. But now, we have made new functionality in address lists, and we can simply add IP firewall address list, add some name what you want, and type in domain name, for example, Facebook, and create simple firewall filter forward chain, which will drop access to destination address list called blocked. In my case, it contains all Facebook IP addresses, and users won't be able to reach all domain names included in this blocked address list. You can see here, for example, I added domain name Facebook. It resolved that it has, at that point, one IP address, and created drop rule, which actually blocks such connections from local network to Facebook services. Here is a long, big amount of firewall rules, but slides will be available online afterwards. You can check these slides if you, for example, want to block access, let's say SSH or Telnet or something like that. But you don't want to disable such services completely. You want to disable them only in case someone is attacking your device. Here is a simple, maybe not simple, but actually it's simple, maybe not at the first way how you can drop such connections. Since firewall rules are processed in queue order, first one, second, third one, fourth one, and so on, we make such situation. Let's say there comes first connection to my device. I go through all rules, and in the end, I will reach the last rule. If it was the first connection to the destination port 23, I add IP address, source IP address from which connection came to some address list for 1 minute. Now, that guy who is attacking my device tries to connect second time within this 1 minute. he will get to this rule. I see, I added his IP address already to address list stage 1. His IP address is already in the list stage 1. I need to add his IP address to list stage 2. It means that he has already tried to connect second time within 1 minute. It sounds suspicious. But if he tries to do it for the third time already, his IP address is already in stage 2 address list. I will add him to the blacklist for 10 days, for example. In such way, you can move IP address from list to list to list and drop access for a longer period if you see it's suspicious traffic. So if you won't be able to connect within 1 minute with 3 times successfully, then access for you will be dropped. This is how you can determine attacks to your router. So here you can see multiple rules. See, last rule worked for 30 packets, then 20, then 10, and you see that each connection was processed and in the end added to the address list. Okay, that's enough about firewall at the moment. Now let's talk about bandwidth control. Do you remember that establish the related fast track rule, which accepts replies from internet to your local service or your router? Recently, we introduced new functionality called fast track. Who knows what is fast track? Really, no one knows what is fast track? You don't know what you are missing, guys. Basically, if you made connection from your local subnet to the internet, so you are responsible for it, right? You trust this service. So all replies, why should I check each and every reply in firewall, in queues and so on? If you trust these connections, then trust it. We will skip all firewall, queues and so on by simple firewall rule. Action fast track connection for established and related packets. These packets now won't be any more processed in other firewall rules, in queues and so on, and results are amazing. For example, we had we did test RB 2011. We had gigabit connection. We had, if I remember correctly, 300 megabits, and CPU was 100% loaded with all default configuration. Now we added fast track rule, and connection is 900 megabits, and CPU isn't even 100% loaded by one simple firewall rule. But you can use it only if you won't be using firewall other features or queues, for example. If you want to use queues, for example, to limit some traffic for, let's say, some local user or something like that, you can simply create a simple queue, specify target, for example, this IP address, and set max limit. And now this one single local user with such IP address won't be able to reach higher speeds than 5 megabits. But for example, if you have sometimes 2 users in local network, sometimes 10, sometimes 100, what limit set for each user? Some static limit, for example, 1 megabit 1 megabit 2 for second user, and in the end, you won't be using whole available bandwidth. In such case, you should create PCQQ. It's very simple. You specify target address, which is your local subnet, and specify queue type PCQ upload and PCQ download. And what it will do, it will divide whole available bandwidth equally for each user. Let's say if we have 10 megabit connection, for 2 users, each will get 5. We have 4 users, each will get 2.5, and so on and so on. So this allows to distribute bandwidth equally. So now about debugging tools. The main and most simple debugging tool is logging. For example, previously I was talking about attacker to SSH services, which we added to the blacklist address list. I can now create or set on this blacklist firewall rule checkbox log to yes. And what will happen now? I will see on log every time then when this rule works, and we'll see which IP address was added to the address list and so on, and I will be able to try to trace the attacker more easily and so on. For example, if you use LTTP tunnel and it isn't working, you can go to system logging menu and add, for example, L2TP, little typo, and debug topic. Now on logging, you will see all L2TP related messages which should help you find the cause why your L2TP tunnel isn't working. But you can only, there are more possibilities. You can use not only local logging, you can also send logging messages to the disk, to the file, or to the remote server, for example. And by using such logs, you can, without checking your device, for example, configure your monitoring systems that they let you know about suspicious logs, send you, for example, in an email. If you use logging, it's pretty simple sometimes to determine the problems with your device much more faster. Here is an example for when user root is trying to access my device via SSH service. Problem is that he's simply using wrong username, wrong password, and consuming my CPU. If I use logging, I didn't have firewall rules before. I know I have to protect my SSH service with firewall rules or disable service and so on. Log just tells me that I need to do something to fix this. There are also other debugging tools besides logging. Let's start with a torch. Torch tool simply shows traffic passing through your device at the moment. In my example, I have opened Torch on bridge interface, and I can see connections from which IP address to which IP address, which protocol connections these are, and the rate of connections, what kind of bandwidth they are using. And also often we receive complaints that why do I see 2 gigabits of traffic on my, most likely not 2 gigabits, let's say 500 megabits on my one interface, but actually in local networks there is only 100 megabits. Because on your interface someone is trying to attack your device. You can simply run Torch tool on your one interface, sort these connections by TX or RX rate, see from which IP address connections are established, and protect your device by firewall or something like that. You can, in simple way, find attacker to your router by using Torch. There is also another tool called Sniffer. Sniffer works in some kind similar way as a Torch, but it doesn't show connections or something like that. You can, based on different parameters, catch packets passing through your device. Let's say I just made a Sniffer settings that I want to catch each packet on bridge interface where IP address is this IP address and TCP packets, and start this tool. I wait for a while, stop the tool, and either check it on graphic interface or download packet capture file, open it in Wireshark, and we will be able to see each and every packet passed through my device while Sniffer was working, and can see contents of this packet. It's very useful when you are trying to debug something, so don't forget about it if you have some problems. Very useful tool, again, Profiler. It's very simple. It simply shows CPU usage per service. If you write to support why my router has 100% CPU usage, most likely I won't be able to answer you. I need to see the screenshot from the profiler. You can open tool Profiler, start the tool, and you will be able to see which service is consuming CPU. You will, for example, if it's firewall, you will know that you need to adjust firewall configuration and so on. And also simple and useful tool is graphing, which can enable traffic. You can simply draw the graph of used traffic, or for example queues usage or resource usage, and you can see let's say, yearly, weekly, monthly, daily, for example, CPU usage in the graph, or bandwidth usage, and so on. So you can see some spikes or something like that and determine where was the problem, if there was a problem, and so on. And we also have the Dude. It's a powerful network monitoring tool where you can, for example, add your network devices and you will be able to get different messages. For example, as this device becomes red because you can't ping it at some point, and so on. You can draw all your network in the Dude tool, and you can manage devices, upgrade devices, change configuration, and so on. It's very powerful for monitoring your network, and if you start to use Dude, you most likely will be using it all the time. Okay, very simple advice. If something isn't working as expected, keep everything up to date. In RouterOS, at the moment, we have 3 possible upgrade channels for RouterOS. The first one is current version. It's the latest stable version, which includes all the fixes and all the latest features available. So if you want to use latest features and pretty safe RouterOS version, then use current channel. But if you are not so sure about it and don't need new features, you can use bugfix channel, which is older versions than current, but it also must be a bit more stable than current version. It has been tested for a longer while, has more safer fixes included, and so on. There is also RC version, which is for people who like to play around with new features and so on. We release it every day basically. It can be crashing. There could be features not working fully and so on. It's work on progress. But many people like to test new things right away, so they use RC versions and actually then report back to us about the problems, and we can fix them before the current release. So I suggest if there are problems, upgrade your device to either current or bugfix channel. Maybe your problem will go right away. Here you can see, for example, when I checked for updates on my device a while ago, in current channel, there was, for example, 138.5 version released with only one fix. So you can see if I had, for example, 38.4 device installed, then the next version includes only this one fix. So, okay, I feel pretty good about it. I will upgrade my device. So that's about configuration and debugging by yourselves. But what you should do when the device stops working? Let's again start from the very beginning. What to do if you can't access the device, can't do anything with it, you see, maybe you even think it's broken. There is a feature that on routers, on router boards, backup router boot version is installed. What it means? Router runs not only on RouterOS, but actually on router boot, which helps router to boot up and so on, do other things. And sometimes if incorrect version is installed or some bad version is installed, problem is caused by this router boot. But in router boot, in the background, there is installed one router boot version from factory, which should work always. And if you can't power on your device, or you at least you think so, all you need to do is power off your device, press and hold reset button, power router on, and release reset button. And now it will be using not your installed router boot version, but that factory router boot version. If router turns on now, you know that was the problem. Just upgrade firmware and it will work afterwards. Okay, but you tried that and it didn't help. So it shouldn't be router boot problem. Now try NetInstall. NetInstall is a tool which helps to reinstall RouterOS software on our devices. There are many things which might affect NetInstall, for example, firewall, wrong DHCP configuration on the same subnet and so on. So if you sometimes cannot NetInstall device, I really recommend to try to reinstall another router. Maybe simply you have configured NetInstall incorrectly, and that's the problem, not the router. And if you have tried this and still cannot, for example, access your device, maybe you did something wrong in your firewall configuration or something like that, simply reset device. Maybe problem was in wrong configuration. Maybe you did accidentally disable interface and you are not being able to connect the device. Believe me, that happens. That's why, for example, we disabled simple shortcuts in the Winbox, because many people were locking themselves out of their routers by disabling interfaces and so on. If you have a device which has serial port, it's very useful to use it for debugging. Let's say your router isn't booting up. Just connect serial cable to device, power device on, and you will see how router boot, the firmware is booting, and when it stops, if it stops, and so on. Maybe actually problem is with IP addressing or something like that. You can connect the device through serial port, fix the problem, and router will work properly again. If you tried router boot, net install, reset the device and serial port, we recommend to exchange device with another. Test it with the same configuration, see if the same problem appears. If the same problem appears, then most likely problem is in software. But sometimes you simply, for example, can't access your device again. As the problem isn't in configuration, it isn't in a broken device, simply you have chosen not enough powerful device for things you are trying to do. CPU is 100% loaded and there are the problems. So maybe you simply need more powerful router for services which you are trying to provide. But what to do when you have tried all of this and can't figure out problem by yourself? First of all, you can ask for the help with distributors or consultants. Distributors are companies which sell devices to you. They offer also, maybe that's up to them, maybe services with configuration. Let's say if you bought a router from them and it's still under warranty and it's not working as suspected, you should get in touch with them, ask what to do. Maybe they can help you, maybe they can tell where the problem is. Consultants in most cases help when you don't know how to configure a router, you need assistance, get in touch with them, they will help you. There are many people also registered to our forum, and you can simply go to our forum, mikrotik.com, ask your question, tell your opinion, and so on, and other users might help you, might tell you what to do. It's a big community, so it's very active. I suggest to use it and maybe connect and check what's out there. And if you can't figure it out by yourself, consultants can help you, distributors can help you, and other users can help you. You can visit our wiki webpage with our documentation. Maybe you can find an answer to your question there. And hardware troubleshooting. If router isn't working, router isn't only device in the equation. In most cases, let's say if we have some wireless access point in the tower, you say, for example, Ethernet interface is flopping, but who's to say that router is the problem in this equation? Usually, also test power adapter. Maybe that's the problem. If you use PoE for powering the device, test if PoE injector works properly. Check Ethernet cables, check grounding for your device. If you have device with, for example, wireless mini PCI slots on something like that, make sure that card is properly connected. Maybe choose another card and test. Maybe problem goes away and problem is with wireless card, and so on. And in the end, of course, check power source. Maybe router is rebooting because there is problem with power source, and actually there is nothing wrong with router at all. And when you have gone through all of this, you should get in touch with MikroTik support. When you haven't configured your device properly, you should get in touch usually with distributors or consultants, or ask in forum, or figure it out by yourself. But if you have simple questions, we will try to answer you. But you have to send first to us your current configuration. Simply generate support file on your router. It will contain all configuration, logs, and so on. It won't contain passwords or something like that, so you don't need to worry. And if you worry, for example, that we will see your IP addresses, believe me, we don't care about them. You can send just support output file, explain your problem, we will try to help you. Okay, that's the one of the software issues, problems which we are handling. The another one is, for example, if your router runs out of memory, it's rebooting. After reboot, you see in log message router was rebooted due to out of memory condition. First of all, always it's mandatory, upgrade your device. If it was software problem, we might spend weeks trying to trace it, and what happens if we in the end trace it that we already fixed it a year ago? So upgrade your device first, check if problem remains. If it remains, then do the following. Reboot the router yourself and generate one support file, and now wait until RAM memory fills up. Let's say if you have a device with 8 gigabytes of RAM, after reboot, generate support file, now wait, let's say 4 gigabytes are left, generate a second support file. Send both of these support files to support. We will try to see the difference between them and find what is causing this problem and give you solution. Another type of software issue is that device freezes. You can't connect to it, you don't know what has happened to it. Again, upgrade device first. So we wouldn't waste a lot of time trying to debug a problem which might be already fixed. And if it will in the end be software problem, we will still need you to upgrade device because we can implement fixes only based on the latest version. So upgrade is mandatory. If the device has serial console, connect serial console to the device, make sure you have access to command line interface, and just wait for a freeze to happen again. Maybe you will see on serial console what was the problem, send the whole serial output to the support, we will try to help you. If you have connected to the device through serial console and it freezes, but still serial console access works, then while it's frozen, generate support file through serial console. Now reboot device, download the support file and send it to us. Because if device freezes, you reboot it, generate support file afterwards, we can't in any way guess what was happened. Such file would be generated at the moment when device is not working properly. Then we should see what was the problem and help you right away. And in any other kind of problems, what you might have, for example, reboot, kernel failure or something like that, again, upgrade device first. Upgrade the device, and if the problem remains, for example, reboot, device rebooting by itself, after it reboots itself, generate support file and send it to us. If there was software crash, we will see it. We will tell you what was the problem, what to do next in order to fix it, or what we need from you more in order to see where the problem is. But upgrade is always mandatory because maybe problem is already fixed, and even if it's not, if you need to make some fix for it, we can make it only based on latest RouterOS version. When you write to support, first of all, please briefly explain your problem. There is no need to tell me how many kids do you have. There is no need to tell where you live or something like that. Try to stay connected to the problem. Give brief problem explanation. Don't overcomplicate things. Try to focus on the problem. Send all the files mentioned before. Support files, log files, screenshots, serial output, everything what you when you try to fix the problem by yourself. Make the notes and document results. For example, you write to us, I have a problem. We give you one thing to do. Try out this. Don't simply reply, it didn't help. Please tell, it didn't change anything. It got a little bit better. It got a little bit worse. It matters. We can know if we are digging in the correct direction or not. Always document changes and tell us if something changed, if not, and so on. If you make some kind of configuration changes during conversation with support, then always send again new support file, because we need to see what you changed. We need to make sure that you did what we asked you to do and didn't make any mistakes during that. And please, please, please try to reply always within same email conversation. If you will send new email, it will be new support ticket, connection to all the emails, all support files will be lost, and most likely you will start to debug the problem again from zero, and it will make everything harder. So try to reply within the same conversation. So thank you for your attention. That's all from me now. Are there any questions?
About wireless mode, I need to ask about repeater mode, because in Quickset or also in wireless, there are no
repeater mode in Quickset. Yeah. Yes, no, yeah, currently there is not such a solution, but as I was telling, Quickset is for basic users who doesn't even want to know what's in this little box and what it does. If you want to use a repeater, it's not included in Quickset, but there is a wizard which allows you to create repeater. It's not included in Quickset, but it's still easier than create everything from zero. You can go to the wireless menu, press button set up repeater, and you will go through wizard, which will allow you to make repeater configuration on your wireless device. But yeah, in Quickset it's not included. Yeah. Quickset contains all the basics. Sorry?
In wireless menu, there are wizards for repeater?
There is, yeah, if I remember correctly, then there's a button set up repeater. Yeah.
Okay.
If you don't have button, you have to upgrade your RouterOS version to lighter one.
For Winbox, if it is, because I tried to find the version for Mac.
There is no version for Mac. You can run it through the Wine, but currently it's only solution. If you can do something by using Wine and latest Winbox version, at the moment 3.11, then unfortunately you need to use either command line or webfig at the moment.
How can we block, for example, Facebook domain for specific user and user manager?
Do you mean like you know this user IP address, or you don't know it?
If I know this IP address, or by user
user manager.
Yes, yes.
Yes. In user manager, you have opportunity on profile limitations to specify address list. If you specify address list, let's select some random name, for example, test1. When user will connect, his IP address will be added to this address list, IP firewall address list. Now create simple firewall rule which will drop access to blocked IP address from IP addresses in source IP address list, this test1 for example. And now when user connects, you see on user manager, for this user I selected to add his IP address to this address list. If his IP address is this address list, his access to another blocked sites, will be dropped only for these specific IP addresses. So I suggest to use address lists on both sides. Blocked IP address add to blocked IP address list, for example, Facebook, YouTube, and so on. And then use another address list for IP addresses for whom you want to block this access.
Only by IP address, not by user profile.
You can also in user profile specify address list, but basically in the end it all depends on IP address. If you, for example, use hotspot, you can use these rules which says which services are available, which are not. But in the end, anyway, all connections are based on IP addresses, and add IP address to the address lists, and you see which connections are blocked, which are not. You don't need to type in firewall rule for each user, each IP address, but use address lists. Then you will, with one rule, drop access to specific services for all users which you want. I hope that I did answer your question. Yeah. Any more questions? No? Just a second.
Can you please explain what's the fast track again? Just I want to understand.
Fast track is IP firewall rule.
Yeah.
Simple rule. It will work with IPv4 TCP UDP packets, and you say that packet which is going through this firewall rule is trusted, and it doesn't need to be checked against other firewall rules through queues and so on. You basically say, I trust this connection, I don't need to check it anymore, it can go full speed. Do you remember I showed that diagram, input, pre-routing and so on. If you say this connection is fast-tracked, it will skip most of them. You simply don't need to check each and every packet in firewall, in queues and so on. It doesn't load CPU, and in the end you can get much higher speed with your connection because you fast-tracked it. Fast track, it's like shortcut, Skip firewall, skip queues, go shortcut. Okay, no more questions? Okay, then thank you very much for your attention. But please don't go anywhere. We have left only one